Have you ever asked yourself why the more deeply you care, the more people seem to drift away? Why the more love you give, the more invisible you become? We're taught to believe that care, compassion, and loyalty are the highest virtues. But what if I told you that caring too much can be your downfall, not because you're wrong, but because the world does not move by the same rules as your heart? This is not just a psychological phenomenon. It's a philosophical tragedy. And no one understood this better than Niccolo Machiavelli.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
Imagine this. You give your all to someone, your time, your energy, your heart. You show up even when it's inconvenient. You forgive even when it hurts. You offer help before they ask. And slowly, something strange begins to happen. They respond less. They pull away. They even start to resent you. The very people you hope to save become the ones who walk away. Why? Machiavelli once wrote, "It is much safer to be feared than loved when one of the two must be lacking." That quote alone can shatter the naive soul. He didn't mean you should terrorize others. He meant that when people do not fear losing you, they stop valuing you. When you care too much, you signal that your presence is guaranteed. And what is guaranteed becomes invisible. Let's go deeper. Human psychology is wired for challenge. When something is too easy, too available, or too giving, the human mind devalues it. This is rooted in evolutionary psychology. Scarcity creates value. We are more drawn to what is uncertain, what might slip away, what keeps us guessing. When you care too much, you eliminate the uncertainty. You become the safety net, and though that sounds noble, to others it becomes boring, predictable, even suffocating. So ask yourself this: do you care because they deserve it, or do you care because you fear losing them? Many of us obsessively give because we are terrified of being left. We think that if we just give more, love more, sacrifice more, people will finally see our worth. But ironically, the more you give without boundaries, the more they feel they can take without consequence. Machiavelli didn't just study politics. He studied human nature. He saw that people are not led by ideals, they are led by self-interest. Men are ungrateful, fickle, false, cowardly, covetous, he wrote. Not because they are evil, but because they are human. When your care becomes a resource they can exploit without cost, they will eventually exploit it. Not out of malice, but out of habit. Let's break this down. When you care too much, you become emotionally available beyond reason. You start placing their needs above your own. You become the emotional sponge. And over time, they stop seeing you as a person. You become a utility, a service, a tool. And tools are not loved. They are used until they are broken or replaced. Have you ever been in a relationship where you gave your all, and yet they left you for someone who gave far less? That's not an accident. That's human nature. The less available partner triggers desire. The one who gives too much triggers guilt, obligation, and eventually resentment. Machiavelli would tell you, the vulgar crowd always is taken by appearances, and the world consists chiefly of the vulgar. People fall in love with illusion, not sacrifice. This is not to say you should be cold or manipulative, but you must be strategic. If you want your care to be valued, it must be earned. If you want your love to be respected, it must be disciplined. If you want your presence to be appreciated, it must be rare. You cannot offer your soul to people who have not proven they are worthy of touching it. There's a brutal truth here. Not everyone who leaves you is bad. Some left because you trained them to take you for granted. You taught them that no matter what they did, you would stay. You made your absence impossible. And in doing so, you made your presence irrelevant. Now pause. Ask yourself in your life, who have you cared for too much? Who did you lose by loving too deeply? Was it really love? Or was it fear? Was it devotion? Or was it desperation in disguise? There's a psychological pattern known as caretaker fatigue. This is when a person becomes so emotionally invested in helping others that they lose their own identity. They begin to derive their worth from being needed. And when they are no longer needed, they collapse. Machiavelli would call this a weak position. A wise man ought always to follow the paths beaten by great men and to imitate those who have been supreme. Supreme men and women do not drown in the needs of others. They uplift, but they never lose themselves in the process. Let me share a scenario. A man is in love with a woman who is emotionally distant. He tries everything: texts, gifts, time, affection. She doesn't respond. She even pulls away further. He tries harder. She leaves. Why? Because he gave her certainty. He gave her all the power. Machiavelli would say, everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are. She saw his desperation, not his value. She saw his need, not his strength. Inversely, another man keeps a balanced approach. He gives, but never more than he receives. He offers love, but with standards. He walks away when disrespected. He is kind, but not desperate. He is loyal, but not blind. And people chase that man. Why? Because he respects himself. He and others follow that example. That is Machiavellian wisdom in action. You see, when you care too much without self-respect, it's not love, it's abdication. It's surrendering your own throne. But no one follows a king who kneels to everyone. No one honors a queen who begs for affection. The world honors those who know their value, and value is only visible when it is withheld. So what should you do? First, understand your worth is not defined by how much you care. Your value is set by how much you withhold when necessary. Second, create emotional boundaries. Ask yourself before every act of care, is this empowering me or depleting me? Third, master the art of mystery. Do not reveal everything. Let people wonder. Let them earn your depth. Machiavelli warns us, he who causes another to become powerful ruins himself. When you give too much, you empower others to control you. When you never say no, you teach them they can live without consequences. When you are always available, they will forget what it feels like to miss you. Have you ever lost someone and felt like you were never enough, even though you gave everything? That wasn't a failure. That was a lesson, being a brutal, necessary lesson. You cannot love others until you first love yourself enough to walk away when your care is abused. And maybe that's the deepest question of all. Do you care because it's love? Or do you care because you're afraid to be unloved? One is power. The other is slavery. Machiavelli lived in a time of betrayal kings and shifting alliances. But his wisdom applies today more than ever. In a world overflowing with noise, attention, and fake intimacy, real value is in scarcity. Real power is in restraint. Real love is in balance. And so, the next time you feel the urge to give more when someone pulls away, stop. Pause. Ask, are they drawing closer because they value me? Or because I've made myself too easy to leave? The ones worth keeping never leave, because you care just enough, and because you care for yourself even more. Everything changes the moment you realize that the deepest form of care is rooted not in sacrifice, but in self-respect. When you give endlessly, without boundaries, what you're truly doing is handing over the keys to your emotional kingdom. And Machiavelli would warn you, never give others the power to destroy you unless they fear the consequences. Think about that deeply. The moment someone realizes you'll stay no matter what, they stop fearing your absence. And when there is no fear, there is no reverence. We often confuse love with approval seeking. We think that if we just keep showing up, keep giving, keep proving our loyalty, someone will finally see our worth. But what if that very behavior is pushing them away? What if, by trying to be everything for someone else, you become nothing to yourself? Machiavelli said, the first method for estimating the intelligence of a ruler is to look at the men he has around him. So who are you surrounding yourself with? Are they elevating your value or draining it? Let's take this deeper. When you care too much, you step out of alignment with your own center. You begin orbiting around others, adjusting your thoughts, emotions, even your identity to maintain connection. But connection built on self-erasure is not connection, it's dependency. And dependency breeds resentment, not just from others, but from within you. Slowly, quietly, you begin to hate yourself for becoming so small for someone who never asked you to expand in the first place. Have you ever been in that place where you shrink your needs, your voice, your truth just to keep someone close? And then when they finally leave, you're not just heartbroken, you're hollow. Because they didn't just walk away from you, they walked away with pieces of you that you gave freely, but never retrieved. Machiavelli understood the psychology of loss. He knew that the strongest leaders and lovers are those who never give anything they are not willing to lose. Let's talk about emotional power. People don't leave because you care. They leave because they feel no resistance. It's like a magnet. If there's no opposing force, there's no tension. And tension, psychologically, creates value. When you care too much, you remove the edge. You become passive, predictable. And the human mind is wired to crave complexity, not chaos, but challenge. If you give someone 100% before they've earned even 10%, you destroy the game before it begins. Machiavelli wasn't cynical. He was clear-eyed. He observed humans as they are not as we wish they were. He wrote, "Men judge generally more by the eye than by the hand, for everyone can see and few can feel." In other words, people respond more to appearance than intention. They see your behavior, not your heart. You may intend to be loving, but if your actions scream desperation, that's what they will respond to, and eventually reject. You have to understand this. In relationships, The one who values themselves more will always be the one chased. It's not arrogance, it's gravity. Self-worth is magnetic. When you care too much, you invert that gravity. You become the chaser. You become the one orbiting someone else's sun. And in doing so, you lose your light entirely. So here's a radical question. What if the key to being loved is caring less? Not in cruelty, not in emotional laziness, but in reclaiming your center, in giving from overflow, not emptiness, in showing up not to convince someone of your worth, but because you already know it. What if caring less is not about detachment, but about precision? About giving selectively, wisely, and only to those who meet you in kind. Kings, like nations, respect boundaries. Machiavelli knew this in politics, and it applies in love. If your emotional borders are wide open, any invader can walk through. But when you guard your energy, when you make others earn your loyalty, they respect it more. They value what they had to fight for, what they had to grow into. There's a psychological effect known as the Benjamin Franklin effect. When someone does a favor for you, they begin to like you more not because you did something for them, but because they invested in you. When you care too much, you rob them of the chance to invest in you. You do all the work. You carry the emotional weight, and so they never develop the attachment. Because attachment requires effort. Effort creates value, and value sustains connection. So what do you do when you feel the urge to overcare? When you want to text again, show up again, prove yourself again? You pause. You ask, is this action coming from clarity or fear? Is it coming from strength or scarcity? If they walked away, would I still feel whole? If not, then you're not loving them. You're trying to escape yourself through them. And that's not love. That's abandonment of yourself. Machiavelli would say, it is not titles that honor men, but men that honor titles. Similarly, it is not love that gives you value, it is you who gives love its honor. Your emotional gifts are not disposable. Your presence is not cheap. Your care is sacred, but only if you believe that first. Let's imagine a scene. You're in a room with two people. One gives you everything instantly: attention, praise, affection. The other is kind but discerning. They listen, but don't overshare. They're present, but not needy. Who do you find more intriguing? Who would you work harder to impress? The answer is obvious. Humans chase what feels earned, what feels rare, what feels sovereign. You must become emotionally sovereign. That means knowing your value without needing others to confirm it. It means offering love not as bait, but as a mirror. A mirror that reflects back the worth of the person receiving it, but only when they've shown they can truly see you. There's a haunting irony in all of this. When you care too much, you may be secretly hoping that someone will finally care enough to rescue you from your own emptiness. But no one can do that. No one can give you back the parts of yourself you gave away too easily. That's your job. That's your path. That's your war. And Machiavelli would say, a prince never lacks legitimate reasons to break his promise. People will always find a reason to leave when they've stopped valuing you. And the truth is, they often stop valuing you when they feel they've already won. Your love becomes a guarantee, and what is guaranteed becomes taken for granted. So how do you flip the script? You start by reclaiming your silence. Not every emotion needs to be expressed. Not every care needs to be acted on. You begin to move from reaction to strategy, from impulse to intention. You build emotional discipline. You learn to sit in the discomfort of not being needed, not being chosen, not being validated. Because that's where power is born. Machiavelli did not believe in emotional weakness. He believed in calculated strength, in knowing when to give and when to withhold, when to show your hand and when to fold. This doesn't make you heartless, it makes you wise. Because wisdom is not the absence of care. It is the art of knowing when and how to care without losing yourself in the process. So here's your challenge in your next relationship, whether romantic, platonic, or professional: care less by caring smarter. Give, but with boundaries. Love, but with standards. Show up, but never chase. Let your presence be earned, not assumed. Let your absence be noticed, not dismissed. And perhaps the most important thing, learn to be okay with being alone. Because when you no longer fear solitude, you become untouchable. People can feel it. They sense that your love is a choice, not a cry for help. And that changes everything. That makes you powerful. That makes you unforgettable. So ask yourself right now, if I stopped over-caring, who would still show up for me? If I stopped chasing, who would chase me? If I stopped proving, who would already know? And if the answer is no one, then maybe it's time to stop giving everything to everyone and start giving something to yourself. What if, deep down, people don't even leave because they're cruel or ungrateful, but because they are subconsciously seeking someone who values themselves more than they value others? That sounds harsh, but it's real. The instinct to follow strength is deeply rooted in human psychology. And self-sacrifice, when unbalanced, can look like weakness. When you care too much without commanding respect, you train people to see you as expendable. And in the end, emotional expendability is the death sentence of connection. Machiavelli would have called this a failure of perception management. He said, "The wise man does at once what the fool does finally." In our context, it means that the wise person establishes value early before it is questioned. The fool waits until their love is devalued and then begs to be seen. But by then, it's too late. Perception has already calcified. And once someone sees you as someone who will never walk away, they stop checking if they're worth staying for. Let's take this to a spiritual level. When you love from overflow, you are a source. When you love from emptiness, you are a seeker. And seekers are often abandoned not because they are unworthy, but because they unconsciously place the burden of their wholeness on others. And that burden is heavy. And most people don't even know they're carrying it until they drop it and walk away. How do we become whole? By facing the fear of being alone. By sitting in the fire of rejection not as a victim, but as a warrior reclaiming their soul. When you care too much and are left, you are being given a sacred opportunity. The universe is showing you where you've misplaced your worth, where you've traded your dignity for proximity, where you've confused attention with love. And that's the Machiavellian twist. True power is not in how much you give. It's in how much you withhold, control, and choose. The power of choice is the ultimate currency. When you care too much, you give that choice away. You become enslaved to the emotions of others. Their silence controls your mood. Their distance dictates your self-esteem. Their approval becomes your oxygen. But what happens when you reverse that? When you become the person who is centered, whole, and emotionally self-sufficient, you become rare. You become a challenge. You become unforgettable not because you chase, but because you don't have to. And that's what terrifies people, because most are used to being pursued. When they meet someone who doesn't need them but chooses them, they're forced to level up or walk away. So here's a truth you must hold. People don't remember who gave the most. They remember who made them grow the most. If your care doesn't require them to rise, it will fade into the background. But when your love demands evolution, when it says, "I will meet you, but only if you meet me," then you become an experience, not just a person. And experiences are never forgotten. Machiavelli believed that power must be maintained through perception, boundaries, and at times, fear. In relationships, this translates not to manipulation, but to the cultivation of self-worth that is untouchable. You don't need to instill fear in others, but you must not fear losing them more than you fear losing yourself. Let's visualize this. Imagine you're holding a glass of water. Every time you care for someone without return, you pour a little out. Every time you chase, you pour a little more. Every time you forgive the unforgivable, you tip the glass. And eventually, there's nothing left. People don't leave when the glass is full, they leave when it's empty. Because that's when they stop seeing value. The tragedy, you emptied it for them. So how do you refill it? You start by doing the hardest thing. You stop giving to those who haven't earned it. You pull back. You sit in the silence. You resist the urge to text, to explain, to prove. You let them feel your absence just as clearly as they once took your presence for granted. And in that void, something profound happens. They either rise to meet you or they vanish. Either way, you win. Because your value is no longer dependent on their response. Machiavelli taught that the appearance of strength is often more important than strength itself. In psychology, this mirrors the idea that self-perception shapes how others treat you. If you see yourself as desperate, others will treat you as replaceable. If you see yourself as whole, others will treat you as rare. So what does your posture say about you? What does your silence communicate? What does your willingness to walk away signal? And here's a deeper question. Who are you when no one needs you? Who are you when no one is watching? If you can love yourself in that lonely space, you've already won the game. Because anything others bring into your life is a bonus, not your foundation. Let's imagine a different ending to your past relationships. The one where you cared too much. What if you had stepped back sooner? What if, instead of chasing, you had leaned into your own growth? What if you had made them feel your distance, not your desperation? Would they have stayed? Maybe, maybe not. But you would have stayed with yourself. And that's the love story most of us never tell. Machiavelli once said, "Men rise from one ambition to another first. They seek to secure themselves against attack, and then they attack others." Translate that to emotional life. First, we seek love to feel safe. Then we lose ourselves trying to maintain it. But real love isn't safety, it's sovereignty. It's two whole people, meeting in truth, not in need. So how do we embody this? You practice emotional discipline. You don't respond to every message. You don't explain yourself to people who don't listen. You don't fight to be chosen. You choose yourself so fiercely, so completely, that others either match your energy or exit your kingdom. Because yes, your heart is a kingdom, and not everyone deserves a crown. Here's a final truth. Those who are scared by your boundaries were only there for your benefits. But those who are drawn to your strength, those who stay when you no longer bleed for them, those are your people. Those are your allies. Those are the ones who see you. So the next time you feel the pull to overcare, to give more than you receive, to love harder in hopes of being seen, pause. Stand still, breathe, and remember who you are. You are not here to be used. You are not here to prove. You are not here to chase. You are here to be. To choose, to walk away from anything and anyone that costs you your peace. Because as Machiavelli would remind us, he who wishes to be obeyed must know how to command. And in love, in life, in your inner world, you must first command your own soul. Only then will others follow.